Welcome into ATL Day Ones with Jarvis and Tenitra. Coming up on today's show, the Atlanta Falcons want continuity.
And there's a team locally where there is some skepticism about whether or not the right person is in place to take them to the right place.
And last but not least, and for the culture, how about this? There's somebody else famous going to HBCU. That's all coming up next, right here on ATL Day Ones. Let's go.
This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
I want to start by saying thank you for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. And remember, we are free and available wherever you download your podcast. And wherever you download your podcast, make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. Really appreciate that from you in advance. It's ATL Day Ones, your team every day. Today's episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. But T, when you think about what the Atlanta Falcons have done in this offseason, go back to when, soon as the new league year started, we heard of the $105 million deal for Chris Lindstrom and making him the highest paid guard in NFL history. Amazing. So, right, and you know me, and I was right behind that announcement and saying, like, hey, it's about doggone time because this dude has earned every penny of it. But I think the interesting thing was, not too long after that, probably a few weeks after that or whatever, we heard that Kaleb McGary was being brought back. And I got a chance to ask Chris about that. And I think his answer was pretty interesting to you when you think about how he was concerned about whether or not he was going to come back. And then when he found out, he was just elated. And I think that kind of goes along with the consistency that we've seen from the right side of this offensive line last year and how they were one of the better running football teams in the NFL.
Yeah, I really like the fact that Chris Lindstrom is thinking in terms of the importance of consistency because
Right.
You know who that impacts as well, and it may sound like team obvious, but Desmond Ridder.
Yeah.
That could go a long way for him in terms of seeing the same guys who were there blocking for him last season back this season. Maybe with the exception of obviously the left guard,
Right.
but if that right group is shored up, right on the right side of him, and then on the left side of him, for the most part, we've got team members or players who are shored up, who've been there and done that. That's that other piece, Jarvis. You now have several players who have 3, 4, 8 years under their belt. So if the Falcons, which we do believe they will, whether that's with the number 8 pick, number 44, or any other pick, if they go out and get a left guard for the draft, how important is it? And we know that it's very important that all of those players who've been there during that 4-game sample size, but not only that, they were there during training camp last year. They're here for off-season voluntary workouts this season. So important to have that continuity. And I just love the fact that Chris Lindstrom was able to kind of craft the narrative that way because it makes perfect sense.
And to confirm what you just said about Desmond Ridder being understanding of what it means to have the same guys up front, and especially when you're able to establish somewhat of an identity last year, and he got 4 games of that, he got a taste of that. Like he said when I asked him, because I asked him about those guys coming back and getting big contracts, he said, look at my face. You see the smile on my face? And he had a big old grin on his face saying, you know what? I'm happy these guys are back because I'm familiar with those guys. I know what to expect from those guys. They know what to expect from me. You know, that even though it's only 4 games, but they kind of got a good idea of how I run the huddle and how I get down. And Chris talked about that as well, as far as like how he commands the huddle, and he's a guy that's easy to follow, and you can see the leadership qualities that he has, and that he's done nothing but to exemplify that, in the spring with working out with guys and getting thrown with guys, and then when the OTAs getting rolling here, those are some of the things that guys look for, and that they're going to gravitate towards that every time, 100% of the time.
And hopefully we didn't see a big jump from Kaleb McGary as it relates to pass protection, but it was incremental.
Yeah.
So who's to say that it won't jump a little bit more even this year, right? And as Desmond Ridder starts to kind of get his legs under him, not that he's going to be a running quarterback per se, but there will be times where he can take off. We know he can. Then we know that's where Kaleb McGary shines. So I believe that while it may not have been everyone's first choice to stick with McGary, he's here now. And at least you know for the offense that Arthur Smith likes to run, he really does fit in that offense because his run protection is definitely at the top when you think about others at his position across the league.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? You know, Arthur Smith is not going to put his players in positions to fail. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, like, hey, I understand what the right side of my offensive line is, and I know what their strengths are, and I'm going to cater towards that. I'm going to cater to that every time. And I don't blame him for that. And obviously there are going to be some situations where they're going to have to pass the football. But you hope that, you know, the identity of being able to run the football and establish that's going to help that pass protection tremendously, especially, you know, when you have a guy like Tyler Algier coming back into his second year and coming off the season that he had. So I think this is going to be more than capable of doing what they need to do. Now, speaking of, another little news come out of Flowery Branch, T. How about this? C.J. Stroud, Jalen Carter have been out at Flowery Branch visiting. Like, when you hear those two names put together, making a visit up to Flowery Branch, what's the first thing to come to your mind?
So when I hear C.J. Stroud, my first thought is, well, you have to actually entertain him because, you know, now everybody's starting to play chess now checkers. Now all of a sudden the Texans are like, yeah, we don't know. We might not go quarterback. We're going to take some calls. And, it's all conjecture at this point. But, hey, if you want to be in position to make a move, whether that's up, back, stay where you are, you've got to do your due diligence. To me, C.J. Stroud is just one more example of due diligence. However, Jalen Carter, I really hope that's not just due diligence. Because if he is at
Please
8,
be there. Yes.
If he is at
him.
8, take him.
Take him.
So I really, really hope that one is due diligence, but not both of them are due diligence at all. Because that's still a guy, even with all of the challenges that he's faced off the field in the last, say, 5 or so months that we're aware of, still a guy who, ultimately speaking, if placed around the right people, Calais Campbell, Grady Jarrett, who can show
David
him
Onyemata.
and David Onyemata, exactly, who can show him the way off the field and on the field, I think you take a chance on him. Yeah, no doubt. And as far as C.J. Stroud goes, I think these guys are kind of in two different boats, right? Because I think when you look at coming into this draft season, I always thought that Bryce Young was the better quarterback. He was the best quarterback. He was QB1 for me in my eyes because I've seen enough of greatness from him on the college level. So, and when you think about C.J. Stroud, yeah, there were some times where you can kind of question his big game ability against Michigan. You know what I mean, from a career standpoint. But I think that Georgia game was the thing that put him over the top. And I think him being a few inches, 3 to 4 inches taller than Young, helped him out as well. So you start to see the hype machine, start to build a little bit. Now I think it's starting to come back to earth because as we know, the realness comes out. All of the combine, all that stuff wears off the closer and closer you get to the draft. And I think that's what's happening with C.J. Stroud. Not to say his draft stock is dropping because I still think he can go to Houston. That can happen. Absolutely, yeah.
But I do wholeheartedly believe that, you're starting to see, the Falcons say, hey, we're going to do our due diligence because he might be there. It's a possibility. It could happen.
Absolutely a possibility. But here's what I don't want to happen. Mm-hmm. We now know that one of the more consistent, reliable members of the wide receiver corps has moved on to what you could call greener pastures. According to Olamide Zaccheaus' agency, he's going to sign with the Eagles.
Eagles, yeah.
And my first thought was, and of course, I'm just saying this to make you laugh before we move on.
Yes.
Oh, dear God. Now you've lost a receiver. Please tell me you're not gonna do that at 8. Do you think?
No.
Okay.
No. Short answer, no. A little bit longer than the short answer. I look at it like this. I feel like they've got the slot type of guy in Scotty Miller. I think he has got to be able to fill that role. If you're looking to get the same type of production that you got from Olumide last year,
the numbers,
you know what I mean?
Very much similar.
So I think I'm fine right there. Now, if you're talking about a game breaker type wide receivers, that's what's in their mind.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that. But as far as Olumide Zaccheaus, moving on to greener pastures and good for him. I don't think that's going to warrant them saying, "Hey, we're going to go get Jackson Smith or Jigba." Nah, I don't think that's going to go down like that. But real quick, T, the Braves lost last night. Like 1-0. Uncle Charlie was on the mound. I'm still gonna call him Uncle Charlie because he went 6 innings. He only gave up 1 run. He made a big mistake against Mr. Juan Soto, who had been looking crazy against Spencer Strider. So Juan Soto had to do some making up. So the Braves go 5-1 on their road trip, and I think that the main thing for me, T, is not really care about the loss. Hey, it's baseball. They're going to be losses. But I am encouraged by what I saw from Uncle Charlie and what I saw from the bullpen, given the fact that they're dealing with these injuries and everything like that, and they're still able to maintain games and be able to give their batting lineup an opportunity for them to win games.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately for Charlie Morton, he didn't get any run support. That's the unfortunate thing, because that was another.
And they had plenty of opportunities as well.
Plenty of opportunities. Mm-hmm. And literally, we went back into, okay, here we go with these runners in scoring position, and nobody's capitalizing on it. Here we go with the risp. The risp. Yeah, it's like, again, come on now, Braves. But, whether we like it or not, whether it's just kind of like an old wives' tale or not, they are on the struggle bus in the daytime. I mean, it's the craziest thing, but they just cannot get right in the daytime. So, the most encouraging thing to your point was, actually a couple. Charlie Morton with his 6 innings and 5 strikeouts, and the defense was still on point, Sam Hilliard. So once
they found him one, Alex Anthapa did it again.
Yes.
He did it
so
again.
like you said, losses happen. It's a long season. Losses happen, but when we can still take away the kind of nuggets that you just mentioned and I just mentioned, I feel very confident that they can go into Houston tomorrow for their 3-game set against the Astros and walk away winning that series.
Absolutely, I'm so on board with that. Speaking of something that I'm not on board with, Trae Young being overrated? Come on now. We're going to talk about that next. But first, we got to talk about Built.com. T and I have been talking about the Built bars and how we've been working out, getting our lives together. I'm actually, as soon as we get done with this show, I'm going to go work out because I'm feeling weird. I got to get a workout on. And guess what I'm going to take with me as I go walk out that door and my wife look at me crazy? I'm going to get a Built bar. I'm going to check it out. Now, here's the thing. Built.com has something super special for you, right? April 22nd. Say it with me. April 22nd. Yes, it's going down. They got a new flavor, and we have absolutely no idea what it's going to be. So April 22nd, here's what I want you to do. Go to Built.com. If you know how Built works, they have the most incredible protein bars in the world, and they do the amazing flavor drops with unreal flavors in limited quantity. So mark your calendars, head to Built.com on Saturday, April 22nd, to be one of the first to discover what all the hype is about. And all you got to do is drop in that code LOCKEDON15. You're going to get 15% off your order. I have no idea what it's going to be, but you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if they doggone drop some Fruit Loops Built Bar. Like, you know what I'm saying? Give me a Fruit Loop Built Bar or Apple Jacks Built Bar. That would be absolutely amazing. So, go to Built.com. April 22nd, and find out what that new flavor is and get yourself 15% off as well.
Sounds like a plan that you guys should take advantage of. Boy, oh boy. And I'm excited, too, because they've kind of got us waiting in the wings like, what is it going to be? And another thing that we are waiting in the wings to see is whether or not the Hawks will have a bounce-back game tomorrow night at State Farm Arena when the opening round playoff series transitions back home, right? So we're looking at that and hoping they can get back in this series. But let's be honest, we're not necessarily looking at it like that tells us that they're going to win the series. So you cannot stop looking at the offseason. You just can't.
Right,
and
exactly.
When you look at the offseason, that means you're looking across the rotation. And once again, when you think about some of the woes that we've seen in this team, a lot of it does hinge on their star, and that's Trae Young. So there was an excerpt, a very interesting excerpt recently from a survey in The Athletic. And with Trae Young, they said it should surprise no one. It should not be a surprise that even his fellow players are somewhat skeptical of him these days. He's the franchise centerpiece player, and it's during a time of a lot of tumult, a lot of organizational transition, which means, of course, that's where the spotlight's going to fall. So just like it did in a more flattering light, because when you're up, and you're going to get all the shine, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're down, you're going to get a lot of spotlight as well. It just might not be the spotlight you want. So do you feel like people are still waiting for that run type situation, or they're still evaluating Trae Young, and for that matter, the Hawks, on what happened 2 years ago, and therefore, based on them getting to the Eastern Conference Finals and taking the Bucks to 6 games, are they using that to say, okay, he's overrated because look who the Hawks have been these last 2 seasons since that run?
Ooh, wow, that is an amazing question. I think that it's a lot of different factors that go into Trae Young's overratedness, if that's a real word, or I make up a word from time to time. Y'all know how I get down. But I think when overall, if we're just asking me specifically, is Trae Young as a basketball player overrated? No, because what do you rate him? Is he a super? I've never heard people saying that Trae Young is a superstar or he's one of the best players in the league. I've heard and seen that he's a fringe all-star player, and that's kind of how I look at him. That's how I look at him. He's a really good basketball player who I feel that are certain things that he can do to become a better basketball player and eventually get to that superstardom that he seems like he wants. So I'm not going to sit up here and say the man is overrated, but I will say that some of those other factors, you got 2 coaches that got fired, and both of them look like you. You know what I mean? Now you have Quinn Snyder. Are you going to act right for Quinn? And you got new ownership. I mean, not new ownership, excuse me, but new front office. Travis Schlenk is gone. He was the guy who built that team that went to that 2021 Eastern Conference Final. So he's out the door now. You got a young, inexperienced guy in Landry Fields now running the show. And you got all of the question marks that surrounds that front office and the guys who are participating in that. Nick Wrestler's son. So all those things I feel like are being piled on, which when it comes to Trae Young. Now, granted, he does deserve some blame because he is playing awful right now. Like, this entire season has not been good, specifically shooting from the three-point line. So I think that when all these factors, kind of come together, people they look at the situation like, yeah, he is overrated. Nah, I'm not going to go that far. But I will say that he does deserve some blame for some of the things that have gone down, specifically when it was Lloyd Pierce and also with Nate McMillan and not being able to handle his grown man stuff. I just use that. He's not being able to be a grown man when it comes to certain situations.
Yeah.
I just feel like people are just going to put that into the equation and say, you know what? Yep, he's overrated.
Yeah. And if you compare it to 2 things, number one, if you compare it to Trae from the Eastern Conference Finals a couple years ago, yeah, you might say he was overrated just because there may have been a little bit of overachievement, not just by the Hawks, but by Trae himself.
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
If you're comparing him to that, well, yeah, you could say he's overrated because sample size then, sample size now, night and day. Night and day. So if that's your comparison. Also, if your comparison is that you expected him to evolve his game after that run, then yeah, you could say he's overrated because the game hasn't evolved enough in critical areas, right?
Right.
So I can understand why his fellow players, coaches, and the like would say he's overrated, but I also think that that is a premature rating. Because we are talking about someone who's 4 years into his career.
Yeah.
So hit me with it if he's 7 years in, a la Michael Jordan. First time you win a championship is your 7th year. Hit me at that point if he hasn't gotten to where we thought he would have gotten based on what happened 2 years ago. And that's where I think I draw the line in, okay, what is your definition of overrated? What are you basing it on? What are the merits of that? But again, I can understand because when you look at the performances in games 1 and 2 of this series, it's like not only do the Hawks need to reset, but if we whittle that thing down, Jarvis, really it's Trae Young who has to reset.
Yeah.
And to me, Trae Young, and there are a couple others I want to talk about, but him in particular, and I was thinking about this, as we move closer and closer to the offseason, to me, one of the bright spots of this run when it ends is going to be the move to get Quinn Snyder when the Hawks did. Because now he has a serious sample size. He's got almost a third of the season's worth of sample size. He's got a play-in game and some playoff games to see who can step up when there's pressure. He has an opportunity also to show us, Jarvis, if he can make the right moves as well. The right move was to bring him in, but he needs to show us as well what kind of adjustments he can make in this must-win game, starting with Trae Young.
Yeah, I think that when and the thing that kind of gets me a little afraid a little bit. Let me open up my feelings, open up my heart a little bit. Let me open up my chest a little bit here, T. Is when Quinn Snyder says keep shooting. And it was one particular time after practice, or it was during the interview, and Trae Young was just like, "Yes, sir, coach." And I was just like, "Oh, I don't know how I feel about that," because he's been in a shooting slump for basically the entire season, T. And I'm just like, "Okay, that's your response to that." Right. I don't know how I feel about that, because we know he's gonna shoot it. Because they had some coaches prior.
He already knows you're gonna shoot it.
Yeah, exactly. He's like he ain't talking to you, bro. Like, I think you need to understand the message. Like, he ain't talking to you. He talking to Jalen Johnson, Sadiq Bey, John Collins, all them folks. That's who he's speaking to. But because we know you have confidence in shooting the rocks, but I think that's the thing that I feel like I don't know if that's the reset. Like, it might be, hey man, you need to get people more involved, or you need to get to the basket more. You need to stop turning the ball over.
Yes, that might be the
reset. That's the reset right there. Stop turning over the rock like you doggone DeAndre Hunter or something when you're on the ball. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, that has to stop. And I think too, there have to be some adjustments that Quinn Snyder is going to make. And I don't want to say Clint Capella I think he's having like a solid series so far, a solid postseason. However, he's not going to have a breakout postseason when he's going up against a team that plays small ball. I mean, they pretty much put forwards out there. And you got Al Horford out here shooting threes at a 45% clip. So that's just, so matchup-wise, that's when you start to say, I mean, at least Onyeka will take a three, regardless of if he's going to make a whole lot of them, but he can at least get out there and give you a 17-foot jumper, or he can give you a three every now and again. He's a bit smaller, so he can bang in there with those forwards, right? And so that's what I'm interested in seeing as well. Not so much that Clint played poorly, but rather what's the favorable matchup in the front court if you can't get a favorable matchup completely across your backcourt.
Yeah, and that's going to be the key. Like, that's what I'm evaluating, just from a standpoint of, like, I know they're not going to win this series, but I want to see what type of adjustments are made as they go through this series, because hey, the way it's looking like it's going to be they only got 2 more games to be able to do that.
Indeed, yeah. If we get what we got in the first 2 games, then we only have 2 games left. But if you want to know what we think about that game heading into the game, or if you want to know what we think about the Braves heading into their final 3 games on this road trip, check us out, everydayers. Do what you do. Come through and tell us what you think as well. What are your thoughts on what you want, your expectations out of this Hawks-Celtics series? What are your expectations out of the Braves as we're getting good news about Michael Harris II and others who are slowly but surely bringing themselves back on the field or on the mound in the case of others? So tell us about it, because you're everydayers. We actually take what you say seriously and we appreciate you. So don't forget, stop by ATL wherever you download your podcasts. Listen in, and don't forget, please tell a friend, because there are enough seats at the table for every dayer.
Absolutely. As an everydayer, make sure you go and get that red Solo cup. I've got them for you guys. Just drop it in the comment box. Everydayer. and then, I might do something special for you. But T, this is For the Culture. It is the intersection between sports, entertainment, the culture, and sometimes whatever the hell we want to talk about, because that's just how we get down on the show. Today is no different. When you think about HBCUs, T, over the past 5 or 6 years, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is probably the most talked about. The most conversations that have been had about HBCUs on a public platform since I've been around, since I've known about HBCUs before I went to one. Now in Albany, Georgia. There we go. And of course, Tenitra went to Xavier. You know what I'm saying? Can't go without saying that. But so when you think about like the popularity of them and the conversations about them and people learning about what they actually are and what they're about, I think that when you hear about Fantasia deciding to go back to school, she want to get her business degree. She's going to go to Central State University. That's we know somebody else that went to Central too. HBCU up in Ohio. So, how cool is it to see, Fantasia make that decision, saying, you know what? It doesn't matter how old you are, but I want to go out here and make sure I get myself together and get me a degree.
Yes, I think that is so awesome. And I follow her on social media, and she posted a video where some of the Central State alum gathered around her at the school and they sang the alma mater. It was just, whatever their alma mater song is. I can't think of the word right now, but they sang the song, and it was pretty darn cool. But for me, just looking at her whole evolution, right? Because when we look back at how we found out there was a Fantasia Barrino, it's American Idol. And then as she comes on the scene, she bursts on the scene, we find out, oh, okay, you're from utter and complete singing brilliance, because your entire family can sing, including 2 members of Jodeci. That's just how bad you guys are. Like, it's awesome what they are doing still continue to this day in North Carolina. But the important thing is she just kept evolving.
Well, she came from up there too.
High school. Yeah. I know, right?
People don't know that. Technically, he came from around that way.
He's always going to claim the A. Forget it, Chattanooga.
Yeah.
Let it go. It's not happening. But she'll always claim North Carolina, because she talks about it even on her Instagram. And, she went back to get her GED. And so that
in 2010.
Was huge, exactly. That was huge for her to be able to do that. And then just to kind of see she's doing, she calls it rock soul. So her soul is a little bit different. Her stage presence is absolutely amazing. And she and her husband do a lot to support Black love and to just let everybody know how to have a healthy relationship. So now this past year, she decides to become an honorary member of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. And they have just embraced her, and she's embraced the experience. And now to see her embrace the experience of going to college, it's just, to me, it's phenomenal, because I am a super fan. I love her to death. And to see her just say, okay, there's another hurdle. I want to, experience that. And I think when you think about J.R. Smith, that kind of started it off. And Chris Paul, too.
Yep, I was just about to say that. Yep.
Kind of cool to see them go back. So like you said, never too late to pursue your dreams. Never.
Yeah, JR is an interesting story. When you talk about evolution,
right?
Mr. Henny, rocking around with his shirt off on a parade day, to now playing golf and playing on a team and building the bonds with those guys, all those young brothers that play at North Carolina A&T. He's on the golf team, and actually a documentary out too that's really cool about that. So I got a chance to check out the few episodes from that. So yeah, like J.R. Smith, Fantasia, where they came from, and J.R. Smith having a learning disability, finding that out at a certain age, and being able to deal with that and how to process that, now to being on the honor roll at school and college. It's just a dope thing to watch, to see how people kind of evolve and be able to do better for themselves, and with everybody watching too. So I think that's all the way cool. And I think that's something to be thankful for as individuals and people who get a chance to check it out, because, hey, this is motivating someone. We don't know who, but it is motivating someone. And we thank you guys for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you download your podcast. And wherever you download your podcast, make sure you just leave us a 5-star review. Really appreciate that from you. I'll show a little love. And also those people who've shown love by being everydayers, we appreciate you as well. If you aren't an everydayer, go ahead and drop a comment in the comment box as an everydayer and start listening every day, because you don't tell stories to us. You don't be lying and stuff like that, So drop that everydayer in there and then start listening every day. It's never too late to get started. But if you don't do anything else before you do for the rest of this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever, I want you guys to make sure that you share love, show love, and most importantly, spread love.